Hey everyone, welcome back to Blow Up. Today we're diving into 5 unbelievable tales straight from Reddit's entitled people. These stories range from wild birthday party demands and outrageous family dynamics to insane workplace behavior and engineering fiascos, all packed with humor, intensity, and jaw-dropping twists. Get ready for an epic ride. Let's jump right in. Segment 1. I'm hosting a birthday party and a parent demanded a ride. I'm hosting a birthday party for my kid and once again a parent has demanded I pick them up and drop them off. As the title says, I'm hosting a birthday party and I let my daughter invite some new friends she's made this year. Yesterday I get a text stating, "My daughter and I would love to attend, and since I don't drive, the only way we can attend is if you drive me and my daughter to and from the party. Please let me know because my daughter is very excited to be able to attend." This is literally the first conversation I had with this woman. I don't know her from a hole in the ground. I told this parent I'd be too busy hosting to drive anyone. She seemed really upset in her reply. We live in a farming town that is spread out over a large area. For all I know, she could be on the other side of the township and it could take a very long time to drive them. I also have to pick up the cake and snacks day of the event. I also have to set up and decorate the rental hall the day of the party and tear it down. The rental hall is cheap, but that means I'm responsible for all the cleaning, so that means I'll be there for a long time. This isn't even the first time I've been asked to pick up and drop off another family for a birthday party I was hosting. At least the last time it was a cousin-in-law and not a complete stranger to me. I hope there isn't any social fallout for my daughter, but I already told my kid to blame me because I don't mind taking the blame. Wow, imagine planning a birthday party and then getting ambushed by a complete stranger demanding a personal ride. In our sprawling farming town, who even knows how far that drive might be? Plus, juggling party prep, cake pickup, and venue decoration? Not my idea of fun. If you were hosting an event with a packed schedule, would you risk your precious time on a random ride request or firmly say, "Not today, buddy"? Let me know how you'd handle this kind of entitlement in the comments. Segment 2. I pay my brother $100K a year and this is what I get. I spent the last 7 years building my business to support myself initially, and now, my brother. He has had a lot of mental health struggles in his 20s but pushed through. He left a stable white-collar job he hated and started a $12 per hour retail gig right before the pandemic. He got furloughed. I happened to get a call for a dream job I couldn't refuse, and I spent the next 3 months between training my brother and onboarding to this new company. 4 years later I get rifed and we are working together again. You'd think he would be grateful. Or maybe you wouldn't, considering we are in the Entitled People subreddit. He makes $100,000 a year doing work that should take 6 hours a day max. I don't tell him when to work. I don't restrict his time off. He chooses what orders he wants to accept or reject. He has the ability to make $150,000 a year if he wanted to put in a full day's work. Sounds great, right? Wrong. He complains constantly. He has to respond to client inquiries from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but because he's so busy, he needs my help, despite the fact I already answer all messages outside of business hours and on weekends. If he sees that a message hasn't been responded to in 1 hour and I said I was helping that day, he berates me for not communicating that I'm offline and accuses me of not doing my job. He constantly tells me I don't care about the business, all the while I'm literally completing double his workload, covering 3x more hours of client chats. He has told me I need to tell him if I'm not going to be available and when I'm going offline, even though my schedule has zero impact on his responsibilities or expectations as an employee. I'm frustrated. I'm feeling like the actual roles here are reversed, and in reality he's just a super entitled brat. Paying your brother $100K a year sounds like a blessing, but instead, it feels like I got an entitled employee who never stops complaining. Imagine working double time while he nags about every minute. If you had a sibling earning a hefty salary yet acting like a perpetual boss demanding more, would you let it slide or set some serious boundaries? Share your experience or thoughts in the comments below. Segment 3. Entitled bully gets their just rewards. My wife has an entitled coworker/acquaintance. I use the term acquaintance as she does run in our friend circle, but we try to limit or avoid contact with her. We will call her Carrie. Anyways, Carrie is known for bullying co-workers at work. Saying that she can get people fired, she can't, screaming at people, and at large just general bad behavior. Her favorite thing to intimidate people with is to tell them to fuck around and find out. This is important for later. So Carrie had a fuck buddy. Nothing serious, just a guy she would bang and kick out the door. Carrie is also notorious for collecting engagement rings. She would begin dating a guy, get a ring from them, get them to pay off some bill for her, then kick them to the curb. Again, I bring this up only as context to her character and to reinforce that the fuck buddy guy meant nothing to her. She used him, then kicked him to the curb whenever someone with money showed her attention. She would also frequently talk shit about this guy behind his back. So Carrie was on one of her short-term engagements, so the fuck buddy, let's call him Bill, was currently not someone she was seeing, as the new guy just bought her a $6,000 ring. I'm serious, she collected engagement rings like they were Pokemon, and paid 10 grand to get her roof fixed. So she was happy with this guy and had no interest at all in Bill. Enter Mandy. Mandy is another co-worker of my wife and Carrie. I personally don't know her, but from what I've been told is she just got out of a 15-year marriage where she wasn't allowed to do anything and was very controlled. Carrie and Mandy are friends, drinking buddies. Carrie likes to drink a lot, and by like I mean all the time. But nevertheless they were on good terms. So randomly Mandy meets Bill. Mandy doesn't know Bill's history with Carrie, nor knows that he even knows her. They hit it off like really good. And they are getting along so well that they begin dating. And it blossoms into a great relationship. One that's built on respect and love. Carrie finds out. And she loses her fucking mind. Again, she never dated Bill, never wanted to date Bill. She never had any interest in him besides sex. Hell, she was already engaged to a guy. But Mandy took her man. And she let the world know about it. Carrie started by going to their boss daily and asking him, "Why does that little bitch still work here?" She would also loudly exclaim this on the work floor for all to hear. Also, Carrie spent a whole hour yelling and screaming at her for something Mandy didn't even do. Carrie would also frequently harass them both when they were out and about in town. She would loudly call her a bitch, slut, cunt, and just all the nasty things you can say about someone. She would not only loudly say these things in their proximity but tell anyone that would listen or not listen, basically anyone around her, how she was wronged by Mandy and Bill. And what she thought about it, and that Mandy is fucking around, so she's going to find out. Fast forward 2 months. Mandy and Bill are still together and extremely happy. Carrie is not surprisingly no longer engaged to that guy. Also not surprisingly has already been engaged to another guy and married after a week. It was, unfortunately, the 2-year anniversary of the passing of a mutual friend of all parties involved. Carrie is using this time to take the week off of work to drink. This is a whole other can of worms. Basically, she isn't close to this person who passed as she claims to be. But anyways, once work is over, everyone else goes to the bar to have a drink to celebrate the departed life. So again, once Carrie after 2 full days of drinking sees Mandy, she begins to let loose with all the shut-shaming stuff. Mandy finally, having had enough, attempts to talk to Carrie in an attempt to reconcile. Carrie is having none of this and keeps calling her names and proceeds to tell her that Mandy is fucking around and is going to find out, and ends it by calling her a cunt. Well, I'm guessing something snapped and Mandy straight up threw a beer bottle at her, hitting her in the face. Imagine the cop from The Big Lebowski throwing a coffee cup, knocking her on her ass. There is a slight pause and someone I don't know pipes up, "It looks like you were the one that fucked around and found out." Carrie, obviously stunned, gets up and leaves. The next day she showed up to work with a very obvious black eye. She isn't saying anything to Mandy, but is going to everyone else complaining that she was the victim, completely unaware that everyone had been watching her bully this poor girl for the last few months. Carrie really got what she deserved. Her fuck around and find out moment was a public spectacle. What would you do if a bully like Carrie got their just rewards in front of everyone? Would you cheer on the moment or just shake your head in disbelief? Let me know your thoughts. Segment 4. You want me to clean the office exactly like that? Alright, I'll do it. I work as an office cleaner for a small company. My job description is pretty straightforward, but there's one manager who insists on giving very specific instructions on how she wants the office cleaned. I'm used to a little guidance, but this manager, let's call her Karen, has taken it to a whole new level. One day, Karen gives me a very detailed list of things she wants done during my shift. One item stood out: clean the kitchen counters with the exact brand of cleaner in the back storage room. No other cleaner will do. Okay, no big deal. I've cleaned the office plenty of times, but this was the first time I'd been given such a specific request. So, I go to the back storage room and grab the cleaner she mentioned, no problem. But then, I notice something odd. The cleaner she wants me to use is way past its expiration date and smells like chemicals that shouldn't even be used in an office. I'm talking a strong, toxic smell that could easily knock out a small animal. I thought about going to her and mentioning the expired cleaner, but then I remembered her exact words: no other cleaner will do. So, I decided to follow her instructions exactly, despite the potential risk. Soon the smell filled the entire office. Employees walking by covered their noses and commented on how bad it smelled. One even asked if there had been a chemical spill. Finally, Karen came out of her office, saw the situation and took a deep breath. "What is that smell?" she asked, coughing a little. I calmly replied, "Well, you asked for the counters to be cleaned with the exact brand of cleaner in the back storage room, and that's what I used." She went completely silent and then muttered something about being more specific next time, before quickly retreating to her office. Ever been forced to follow ridiculously specific orders, even when it means cleaning with expired chemicals? I sure did, and now the office smells like a hazardous waste site. How would you handle a boss who takes, exactly as instructed, to a toxic extreme? Let me know in the comments. Segment 5. You want me to disable half of my entire testing stage? Okay. Recently stumbled across this subreddit and remembered a story I thought you guys might want to hear. Unfortunately, my industry is kinda specific, so I will have to change some details and make some things vague to remain anonymous, but the core of the story is all there. TLDR. Design engineering makes a bonehead decision to force me to remove a critical half of the testing procedure for one of the products we build. That decision has wide-reaching effects and causes a different product to experience a 100% failure rate, which forces design engineering into firefighting mode for months trying to determine the cause. Years ago, I worked as a junior manufacturing engineer for a company building complex products, and one of the stations I was responsible for was the first test station. We got the core mechanism and the electronic assembly of the products right off the production line, and I performed white box testing to ensure everything looked right and worked properly before sending it to a different station for assembly and black box testing. I'm trying to avoid talking about the specific testing methodologies used, hence white box and black box, because that's the best way I can describe it without being more specific. White box refers to testing it with direct access to all the internal components so you can measure all the different parts, verify that individual parts work correctly, etc. Black box refers to testing it after the entire thing has been put into an enclosure and you no longer have access to the internals, so really you're just verifying that the thing works and does everything it's designed to do. The product I'll talk about today, let's give it a code name of Azure, belongs to the greater family of Blue products, which were all very similar but may have had different configurations, slightly different parts, etc. Azure was a new product, and in the first few production runs, we saw failure rates of 20% plus at black box testing, the station after mine. When the engineers dug into it, they found that one of the relays on the electronic control board was fused shut on those 20% of units that failed. For whatever reason, they turned to me, they loved blaming my station, and said that my station was causing it. For a bit more background, my white box testing station had powered off and powered on testing. In powered on testing, we turned newly built units on for the first time, which also meant that if anything was wrong that would make it fail when powered on, it would fail at my station. That's why I was always careful to make sure that the initial powered off testing was thorough enough to cover as many of my bases as possible so that when I powered it on for the first time, the unit wouldn't blow up. The design engineering team apparently didn't believe that. They were convinced that when I powered on Azure units for the first time at my station, the initial power surge was sending a big current spike through the relays, which was causing them to fail. Their proposed solution was to simply eliminate powered-on testing during white box testing. This was a terrible idea, so I argued against it. The power supply in my test jig is set to be as closely matched as possible to the actual power supplies we send out with these units into the field. That means if there was a power surge causing the failures, it's a design issue that would also occur in the field. The design engineering team claimed it must be an issue with my tester, because they didn't believe anything could be wrong with their design. I pulled up the datasheet for that relay and showed that it was physically impossible for that relay to fuse in the circuit configuration given the voltage my test jig could supply. Apparently, the design engineers ignored that entire page of my report. They didn't think a junior manufacturing engineer's analysis was even worth looking at, and trusted their own assumptions more. I had yet to see a single unit that was proven to have a good relay before my station and a fused one after my station, which would have been the concrete evidence I needed. But the design engineers said, "We don't need concrete evidence, we're sure this is what's happening. If we disable powered-on testing, we'll lose a lot of test coverage." They simply went, "Whatever, we'll catch any issues at black box." This was a bad idea because our black box tester, while it could tell us that the unit wasn't working, couldn't tell us which part in the assembly was failing. Units that failed white box had a greater than 70% successful repair rate. Units that failed black box had less than 10%, at least without going back through white box. Finally, I argued that we had other products in the Blue family that went through the exact same test jig, using the exact same relay in the exact same circuit configuration, and hadn't seen any issues before. That last argument was a big mistake. What I said was, we have other blue family products going through that same jig with no problems. What the design engineers apparently heard was, we have other blue family products going through that same jig, and they're all killing relays and my name hasn't noticed yet because he's incompetent. They came back at me twice as hard. I fought this as much as I could for 2 weeks before the order finally came down from my direct manager. As per directives from the design engineering team, all powered-on testing was to be disabled from the test jig for all blue family products, not just Azure. For what it's worth, my manager was on my side for most of this, and only gave me the order to avoid any unnecessary trouble when it looked like company leadership was going to get involved. Well, fine. I went ahead and disabled powered-on testing. As I predicted, all of the blue family products, cyan, turquoise, cerulean, etc., started seeing triple the failure rate at black box testing, leaving us with a bunch of units we didn't know how to fix. But that's beside the point. What about Azure? Azure still saw the same 20% failure rate. Nothing changed. Just as I said, my station wasn't killing the relays. So the design engineers took another 3 months figuring out what the actual cause of all the relay failures was, which, as it turns out, was some flaw with the way the black box test was run combined with an underspecified component on the assembly. They spent a bunch of money and got it fixed and never followed up with me saying, hey, looks like you were right, it wasn't caused by powered-on testing at Whitebox. Crucially, I never got a directive to re-enable powered-on testing. Then came the fallout. There was another product in the blue family called Navy. Navy was a bit of an oddball because the client required microcontroller B to be installed, as opposed to microcontroller A on all the other blue family products. That was the only difference, meaning I used the same test jig for it. We sourced microcontroller A from a vendor who also preloaded it with the firmware we needed. Years ago we had done the same with microcontroller B. But the vendor for B that could pre-program them had shut down, and we couldn't find another vendor who could preload the firmware for us. That's when we turned to internal solutions. Someone discovered that the test jig at my station, then managed by someone else, had direct access to the microcontroller's programming interface, so they developed a way to flash the firmware from my test jig. That meant we could now buy blank B units directly from the manufacturer, then flash the firmware ourselves. This was a great solution because blank B units were cheaper, and flashing during powered-on testing wouldn't add an extra step to our production process since it would be part of white box testing. Of course, flashing the firmware required the unit to be powered on. All this happened years before I joined the company and before most of the current design engineers were involved. This was documented in an ECN from 8 years ago, but none of the new team bothered to read through hundreds of ECNs to familiarize themselves with the product history. When they demanded I disable powered-on testing on all blue family products, this microcontroller programming step for Navy was also disabled, meaning any Navy units we built would go to black box testing with a blank microcontroller. I knew this because I knew exactly what my test did, and it was documented. After several months of not building Navy, a new production run finally started. The newly built units passed my white box powered-off testing, then made their way to black box testing, and, boom, 100% failure rate. Worse still, the failure was tricky because as far as the black box tester was concerned, the unit couldn't even turn on. The microcontroller in question held the firmware that controlled power delivery for the entire electronic assembly. Without it, nothing worked. This meant the failure was mysterious and left the black box team desperately trying to figure out what was wrong. I, meanwhile, was content because my test station was working just as before. The design engineer's theory that white box powered-on testing was to blame had led to disabling a crucial process. I eventually revealed everything in a casual conversation, which led to a huge meeting with my direct manager, program managers, design engineers, and even a VP. I explained that disabling powered-on testing had introduced new failure modes documented in ECN number 2082 and that our other blue family products had been running fine when powered on. I got off scot-free, but from that day on nobody blamed me for any issues with white box testing. Imagine being blamed for killing relays, and then forced to disable the very test that proves your worth. Would you silently watch the chaos unfold, or fight back with every ECN you can muster? How would you handle your expertise being ignored, resulting in 100% failures? Share your war stories in the comments. These 5 stories showcase entitlement in all its absurd forms, from outrageous ride demands and mixed-up bus seating to entitled family requests, workplace bullying, and engineering fiascos. They remind us that whether in personal or professional life, entitlement often leads to chaos, but sometimes standing firm and injecting humor, turns these moments into unforgettable lessons. How would you handle these wild scenarios? Let's discuss in the comments. Thanks for watching Blow Up. If these outrageous tales of entitlement made you laugh, cringe, or reflect on your own experiences, please hit like and share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the unpredictable world of Reddit. This is Blow Up. Stay resilient, keep laughing, and never let entitlement steal your shine.